Hello, and welcome to our latest Sacred Wisdom podcast with new special guests, Poppy and Geoff. Poppy and Geoff are the US Central Regional Coordinators for Connecting Consciousness. As a wife and husband team, Poppy and Geoff have worked together for more than a dozen years with spirituality as a guiding light and confidentiality as a foundation of their work as leadership consultants, mentors, certified relationship coaches, and certified family law mediators. Poppy is a registered art therapist, former psychology professor, and Geoff holds a master's certification in conflict resolution. Through their work as mediators and relationship consultants, they believe that holding a safe space for heart-healthy communication to occur is essential for the collective well-being of all. They are on a continual spiritual journey, taking leaps of faith when called to a higher purpose, as they often say they are called to do God's work, which is why they now embrace connecting consciousness. Over to Chris.
Okay, thank you, Becky. Hi, Poppy and Geoff. It's awesome
Chris.
having
Hello,
you join
Becky.
us. Okay, in the Poppy and Geoff's CC bio, they have another sentence that's so beautiful. I wanted to share it here. It says, as Simon and Becky have often reminded CC members, Poppy and Geoff feel called to inspire and to uplift with lightheartedness that is at the core of connecting consciousness. So thank you, Poppy and Geoff, for writing that. And I share it here because one of the topics we would like to talk about today is connecting consciousness. We would also like to touch on honoring one's emotions, which is especially important in today's times. Overcoming adversity and journeys of awakening. And we may even have an inspirational song at the end.
Oh, you're guaranteed to.
Guaranteed. All right. So, Geoff, let's start with you. You have a very personal story that touches on both overcoming adversity and it's also a path to awakening. And before I hand over to you, I want to share with our listeners, every time I hear this story, I get a little choked up. So you're in for a treat. So over to you, Geoff.
Well, it's funny you say that too, Chris, because one of the things that whenever I tell the story, I've always said it's almost like an emotional barometer. It how people react to it shows their levels of empathy, I think, is what we've seen. And we already knew, but long before that you're a person just packed full of empathy. So, and no surprise there. And Becky, we know that we know that holds 100% true for you as well. The story Chris is referring to is 9/11. And, a lot of people, we all experienced 9/11. And myself and my family, we had to experience it personally. My only sibling, my older brother, George, but nicknamed Twig, everybody knew him by Twig, was working in the New York in the World Trade Center in the South Tower when the explosions took place within the building. He was just above where it took place and perished when these explosions took place. One of the things we learned after the fact, Poppy and I both did, that he actually had the opportunity to get out. He was with two of his colleagues, and they went towards a stairwell. And the other two gentlemen headed down. My brother turned around for a moment, wanted to make sure that everybody had gotten out. And unfortunately, that caused his demise. And watching the entire thing take place, it was a very, very, as you can imagine, huge challenge to realize one's sibling is in the middle of this. And I quickly came to the resolution that we'd lost him when we watched all this. And it was a huge crushing blow, as you can imagine. And the hardest part, I think, was it for my family and for my parents too. We never really got a good resolution saying, well, that's it. The game's over. We can't find anybody else. And everybody else, if they're not found, they're probably gone. We never got that. So we had to just make assumptions on this. It happened on a Tuesday, if I remember correctly. And on Thursday, I made the decision to drive down to be with my parents, who were alone down in Florida. My brother's family was up in Connecticut and had a lot of friends and family around them, but I felt I had to be with my parents to sort out whatever we had to sort out. As I hopped in my car and I started driving down with my faithful Labrador Retriever, Tucker, who decided to make the trip with me. And I just gotten out of the Charlotte area where I lived at the time. My phone rang, and it was a reporter from the newspaper there in Charlotte, North Carolina. She said, "I got your name from one of your colleagues in the choir who knew you." And I said, "Great." She goes, "Hey, listen, I know this is a very challenging situation that your brother's in the middle of this. I understand." She asked me a very simple question. She said, "Are you okay talking about this?" And the moment after she asked that question, I felt a presence around me, an arm over my shoulder kind of a feeling, and someone whispering in my ear saying, "This is what you're supposed to do now. You're supposed to tell the story about you and your brother and your life, your journeys, your experiences, your love, your faith. This is what you're supposed to do right now." And upon hearing that in my ear, I said back to the reporter, "Yes, I am 100% good talking about this. I'm ready to go." And so I spoke to this woman for 2 hours, kind of recounting the story of everything my brother and I shared, all of our sailing experiences. We did a lot of that together, racing the sailboat, and just the life and everything we shared. And I found myself saying a mantra over and over again during this time, going, "This is not the way my brother's life story is going to end. It's not going to end in tragedy. He had a wonderful, great life, and it's not going to end that way." And so I did. From that moment on, I was like on a quest to make sure that every opportunity I could tell the best story to the people, whatever audience I had, be it the newspaper, be it in churches. I went to my parents' church, my church, radio. I was on NPR multiple times talking about it. I looked for the opportunities to share the story. And I remember so clearly too, when I left my parents' church after telling the story, I was greeting people almost like a minister would greet people as they walked out the door. Someone said to me, goes, "We're supposed to be lifting you up. You're not supposed to be lifting us up." And I said, "Well, you know what? This is the only way I know how to deal with this, is to try to not make it a sad story and lift people up." So that kind of started me on a quest to do something good about it. And as I mentioned, my brother and I used to race the sailboat together. That was kind of the way we always used to find a way to get together. And the funny thing was, I was the skipper as the younger brother, and he was the crew as the older brother. One might think that might be a challenging dynamic, having the older brother take orders from the little brother. But it wasn't. We worked right together because he knew I could do it really well, and we teamed really well. Unfortunately, my broken heart caused me to want to walk away from the sailing. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't. There was all I could see. There was a empty spot in the front of the boat, and I decided to sell it and move away from the sport. And a year went by, and someone suggested to me, this actual reporter who told the original story. She said, I told her we had the family had my brother had one of these same sailboats, our family's original boat, one of the oldest ones in production. And she said, "Well, why don't you go up and get that boat and fix it?" Because my brother had started the job of repairing this old boat and making it much more seaworthy. And when she suggested this to me, I said, "You know what? Maybe that's what I'm supposed to be doing now. I'm supposed to go get that boat and finish the job that he started." And I did. I went. It was Thanksgiving. It was back funny Thanksgiving weekend. Yeah. How about that? Yeah. That we talk about it this time. It was a Thanksgiving weekend, and after being with my parents, I said, "I'm going to go get that boat." And my dad,
your mother, who's very practical, is like, "What? In the middle of winter, you're going to drive up to Connecticut?"
As my mother would always say, that's just not. That's not just sensible. Practical. That's not practical. I was like, "Well, I know it's not, but I'm doing it anyways." And my dad was very excited because it was his original boat that we learned all the sailing from racing from Dad. And I did. I went and got the boat, brought it home, and I started this cathartic journey, this quest, because the boat was a wreck. It had been abandoned for a year. It was filled with water, and it was just a mess. And I took on this task that I had no idea how to do, but months went by, and I spent this
6 months.
Yeah, 6 months of knee, knuckle breaking work. And Poppy and I were talking about this. You talk about getting lost in something, 0 point things. I got lost in this project. Time went by, hours, meals, things all kind of just went by the wayside, and they weren't important anymore. It was just a quest I had to do to finish and bring this boat back, and bring my own soul and my own spirit and my brother's spirit back in this process. And I did. I finished this task, brought it back to pristine condition. And you talk about, you get emotional. I get emotional at this part, Chris. When I raised the mast on the boat and raised the sails for the first time, it was like a victory. It was raising the flag of victory. And sailing it for the first time when a regatta was going on with a lot of these friends that they knew, and they saw me, and it was the boat became a great symbol then from that point on for me personally, and for many people, of victory over 9/11. And my dad and I ended up sailing it in the North American Championships that just happened to be held at our club that year, and it became a front page story on the Charlotte newspaper. It was kind of the rest of the story, as the old Paul Harvey used to say in his radio shows. And it was great to see a front page. It was literally on the front page, a picture of me sailing the boat. And people were so excited to see us, to see the boat. And it became a story that carried on and was republished and many other things, because so many people were excited to see this, that this joyous overcoming of the grief. And it was my soul that was saved in the process. And I was able to
say to your dad when you were out there.
Yep. I told him, I said, the Twig's with us, Dad, when we're out here sailing. I said, he's with us. And so it was a marvelous moment for me that, and I campaigned the boat, won some big regattas again through it, and was able to eventually, Poppy and I made the decision to donate the boat back to that same club to be an ambassador boat that others could learn to sail with. And because I felt I'd done everything I could do with the boat, it was time for the boat to be served with someone else. And so that's kind of the story of 9/11 and how I dealt with it and how we moved on from it.
And at one point, I was just going to say that recently, a couple of months ago, we were talking about spiritual journeys. And Geoff was like, I don't think I've ever really had a spiritual journey. And I was like, yeah, that 6 months on your knees in the dirt and cut hands and fingers. And I mean, that was your cathartic spiritual journey back in 2002. So that lasted 6 months. And he goes, oh yeah, maybe.
And I know a follow-up to the story, Chris, I know you wanted me to tell too. We always tried to do something special on 9/11 to honor my brother. Often it was sailing. I often took part in regattas. And so we did that. Actually, one year we gave blood.
Yeah. We were living in Florida.
In honor of, they had a 9/11 special blood donation campaign. And 2 weeks after we gave blood, the Poppy receives a phone call. What did they say to you?
You won our 9/11 drawing. And was like, we didn't put our names in for any drawing. What are you talking about? And she said, oh, well, we give $1,000 to anybody that donated blood during the week of 9/11.
To
anybody.
Yeah, but the purpose was, they said, because they just opened up the 9/11
Freedom Tower
memorials. They had and they said that this is so you could go see the place. And I was like, oh my goodness, you've got to be kidding me. We won this.
About 100 people.
Of course, when they heard my story, they were like, this is fabulous. We love it.
Mm-hmm.
And they were excited that we could share it. We did go there. We went. And we saw the memorials. We took part in all the things. And I think the thing that was most fun for me, once again, to tell my brother's story. They had a spot where you could record stories there, so people who went and visited could hear stories about the people who were lost. And I told a story about sailing with my brother that time we raced once again in the North American Championships just before we lost him, my dad and brother and I, in Connecticut. And we were sailing.
This is part that's important because we'll touch on it later. But the year before, so the year 2000, his brother called and said, "Let's go race in the North American," and they were all working, and your mom said,
Mom once again said, that's just not practical, that's not sensible. And it's like, well, you know what? We're going to do it anyways.
Well, and it's like seizing that moment was so important.
And we did. And, I'm so grateful to my instinct to do it, that we seized that moment and didn't wait, did the Carpe Diem thing. And took part in this race, and it was in Long Island Sound. If you know that the Long Island Sound's a big open body of water, and our boat's only a little 19-foot boat. And we had some heavy seas, and we were crashing through some very heavy waves there. And I remember so clearly, one of the things people usually do, and my brother was the first man in the front of the boat, and he took the worst of the waves coming around the bow. And one's instinct would normally be to kind of shield yourself from the wave going by. My brother did precisely the opposite thing. He put his face right into the oncoming wave and was like, is that the best you got? Is that all you can give me? Come on, let's. I can take more than that. So he had that kind of a spirit that was just couldn't be dominated. And so I that's the story I told both at his memorial service and when I recorded it at the 9/11 memorial. So, but just this last year, Poppy and I, as being part of CC, and we had, Michigan was one of the states that we oversee. They had a 9/11 special gathering taking place, statewide gathering in Lansing, Michigan, and Poppy and I made the decision to attend this.
And it was just like a little over a 4-hour drive. And we'd also gotten engaged in Michigan, so it was kind of fun to go back and do that.
Right, and at a little lake that I'll mention too. So we go up and we take part in this, and I had actually brought a PowerPoint that kind of told some of the story that I just told you all, and showing pictures of the boat before and after, me sailing the boat, me with my brother, and I did this presentation, which everybody embraced and enjoyed. And after I finished this presentation, this gentleman who's in the audience walked up to me, a big guy, former firefighter, and retired firefighter, and he looked sheepish. He looked almost embarrassed and nervous. And he said, "Can I have a word with you?" I was like, "Sure, what's up?" And he pulled me off to the side. He goes, "I don't want you to be upset by what I'm saying." I was like, I'm sure I won't be. What? Yeah. And I said, "I don't want you to think I'm crazy." I was like, "Well, of course we won't think you're crazy. Come on, And he said, "Your brother was here." And I said, "Excuse me?" He said, "Your brother was here." I said, "What do you mean he was here?" He said, "When you started speaking, I felt a tap on my shoulder. And I turned around and looked, and there was nobody there. And when I looked back up to the stage, there was someone standing next to you. There was an entity standing next to you on the stage as you were speaking. And I didn't know who it was, but he was kind of nodding along as you were talking. And a couple times he was like, "Come on, get to the point." And I told a story about how we'd recently been to a garden party a friend had, and they had music playing in the background. And I was inside the house for a moment, not hearing the music, talking to a former classmate, a high school classmate of my brother that I bumped into. And we were recounting fun stories about my brother. Poppy comes in from outside going, "You have to come outside." And I was like, "What?" She goes, "Listen to the music that's playing." It was a song called "Spirit in the Sky." And
sing a couple of
"Going up to the spirit in the sky, that's where I'm gonna go when I die." It's a very sweet song about basically meeting Jesus, going to the good place when you die. And it's a song that my brother had kind of jokingly told to a friend one time, "That's a song they should play at my memorial service someday," not knowing that it would be happening how and when it did. Someone recalled this, and it was played at his memorial service. So Poppy and I are sitting there going, "Oh my goodness, listen to this song." I said, "I bet you my brother arranged that from far away here. He made that happen." And we kind of laughed it off and went about our business. So I'm recounting the same story to these people in Michigan about this song. And as I'm recounting it, this gentleman, Dave, explains to me, he says, "My brother was looking at me at the time going, 'Of course it was me, you big dummy. Who else would have done that?'" So, I was like, okay, I guess he did arrange that. So it was just an incredible moment of
and gift.
A gift that I got here on 9/11. Here I am just trying to just tell a story, and little did I know my brother would. And the thing that's remarkable, he found this person in the audience.
There were 50 CC members there.
He found this one person who had the capacity to see him. And Dave has told us he has this ability. He's done this many times, and it's almost a gift that he almost wish he didn't have. People have these kind of things because people think they're crazy when they recount the stories.
Right.
So it was really exciting. I couldn't wait to do it. And Poppy and I then went up to this little lake that I said I used to vacation at as a child with my brother. And I got up in the morning and I learned to water ski there. And I had a fairly successful water skiing career in my life. Did it competitively. And I wanted to ski one more time there at that lake. And I brought my ski and got up in the morning, but it was a very cloudy, overcast day. It wasn't nice. And I was like, gosh, I wish the sun would have shined just so I could have one nice ski. And guess what happened, ladies? The skies parted for some unknown reason. They just parted. And I went out and had a marvelous ski and had a wonderful, beautiful time. And literally, I've never cried water skiing before, but I did. I had tears in my eyes as I was just enjoying this beautiful moment that I know my brother had arranged and made happen for me. So that was the most recent wonderful thing that I was able to experience, and great gift that my brother brought me. But I'll stop there.
Geoff, that's just so beautiful. And both of you, Poppy and Geoff, it reminds me of, brings to mind so many things. One of them is synchronicity, talking about the timing of everything. And we think that it's a coincidence, and it's never coincidence. There's always a helping hand on the other side. And another thing that's sort of even more profound is, when somebody passes and it's in a shocking way, it has such a incredibly shocking rebound effect on everyone that's left behind. But we forget to recognize, and maybe just don't see, that the veil in some ways, in many ways, is just so thin that someone literally just steps out of their body and into a new way of being, and they can still, if they wish, interact with loved ones. And if you're sensitive enough to be aware of that, and it's very, very difficult, especially when someone's just passed, because that's often when you're feeling most traumatized and most emotional, that it's very hard to pick up on signs. But often loved ones really are just there, and they're wanting to get in touch in some way. And Geoff, it's phenomenal and absolutely wonderful that you felt the nudgings, you felt the messages, and you acted on them. And your brother would have been so thrilled. It would have been the time of his life. Yes, he passed, but I'm sure, and I get a very strong feeling, it was the time of his life too, because it's clearly there with you, sort of whispering to you, sort of keeping you going, doing the boat up. And then on the when you were doing the sailing competition as well, I'm fully believe that he was there with you. It's just such a beautiful story.
And the other part of the spiritual journey, that just when you said whispering to you, when I was taking part in one of these regattas, Poppy and I had found each other again, and that's another part of the story. But Poppy was in Florida, and I was up in North Carolina, a long distance away, and I was going out to do this sailboat race.
Yeah, we hadn't seen each other. We'll have to get to that part. Let's do that part later.
Okay.
Because we're getting.
But I was going to say, Poppy was able to reach me. The only thing I wanted to mention this is that I was getting ready for this race, and Poppy had a thought where she was thinking about me.
And it was one of those like deep meditative thoughts, and that sort of praying meditation, like, I hope I hope you do well. Please feel my my energy, my support, my love, and you got it.
And just as this race was starting, I had all this years and years and years of knowledge, and I was just kind of getting this boat back into the game and myself back into the game. And all of a sudden, I had this moment of incredible clarity where everything presented itself to me. I saw everything clearly. I saw where I was supposed to go with the boat. I saw the wind. I saw the race course. And next thing I know, I'm out front. I'm out front leading this big parade of boats, and took it all the way and won this race. And then I got back to my car and I seen my phone. There's a message from Poppy saying, "Well, how did it go?" I was like, it went fabulously. I
had said in the message, "I know you will do well. I know
you'd be stellar," or something. Yes. You said, and I said, and I was. It was, thank you. I felt every bit of that energy. It's incredible how that energy found its way to me. The clarity found me, and I just had this moment of purity. Again, that 0 point again, where it just came to me as clear as a bell how to do it all. Everything I knew came back to me in perfect synchronicity.
That's something else as well, isn't it? Oh, sorry, Chris. I was just going to say that's something else, isn't it? When all your stars seem to align and you do something with the absolute intention of total success, and just that inner knowing and that focusing on it and that total clarity that can bring about it. I've had a few times in my life where I've been on a journey, a bit like a journey or a quest, a short one, and I've been so excited about it that with such a clear idea of the outcome that everything fell into place and everything happened so smoothly that I was able to get out of difficulty quickly, and then and everything worked so that my whole journey worked very, very well, and there was clearly a helping hand behind the scenes, as it were, to help guide me so that everything went really well. And again, that is a bit different from, a spiritual quest where things are very challenging, but often we have to do these. And as you said, Geoff, doing that boat was a spiritual quest.
Yes.
And often, for men especially, it can be a very practical thing. Focusing on a project is a spiritual quest. And, for women too, I don't know what it might be. It might be something else, but it's where you're in a lifetime situation where you have a unique opportunity to develop and grow in a way that you wouldn't have otherwise done so, especially if you are really in the moment and tune into it and can feel the sort of nudgings of spirit when you're doing that. And that's one of those moments, I think, where, if you are aware and you tune into it, then you get a lot more, and that opens up the spiritual path for some.
Certainly.
Yeah, actually, it's funny you mentioned that, Becky, because I was going to touch on spiritual journeys too. I loved it, Poppy, how Geoff said, "Oh, well, I didn't have a spiritual journey," and you pointed out, "Well, yeah, it was this." That's just that's beautiful. And I think, for a lot of people, there's something big that happens. Like for me, I guess I was on a path before, but my house burned down, and then I had all these very deeply personal and spiritual experiences after that. And then, I went through a period of time where it slowed a little bit, maybe to let me absorb all of those things. But I think everyone experiences the journey in a different way. For some people, it's just a series of little things that become progressively like bigger and bigger until you start all of a sudden like, oh yeah, I do listen to my inner voice. And then sometimes it's like that big thing that happened, for Geoff, working on your sailboat, and, for me, my house fire. So I do think it's different for everyone. So I just wanted to point that out, because people who think, well, I'm not having a spiritual journey. Well, sure you are. It's just different for all of us. And then I also wanted to touch on, so Becky, you and Poppy have both mentioned synchronicities, and So I wanted to invite Poppy and Geoff. So I read their book. They wrote a book, 1 billion seconds, about the time frame that they were apart. And that story is just all about synchronicity. So I don't know if you guys want to share it briefly, if there's any such way to share that 32 years briefly.
Sure. Geoff and I were college sweethearts. And at 21 years old, we had this like perfect, first love romance.
There they are. Look at those kids.
So I came from a pretty, conditioned conservative background where women are not supposed to chase men. And I just was sort of taught and messaged in my upbringing that you should be pretty quiet. You shouldn't be aggressive or assertive. And so that was kind of the upbringing that I had. And so when we got to college, I was like, and definitely you don't sleep with men, don't sleep with men. So Geoff was the first person I ever slept with, which was a really big thing for me. And toward the end of the year, we dated the entire first year of college. Toward the end of the year, it was time for me to go back to Wisconsin, where I was from.
Bobby was a senior, I was a junior.
And so I said, what's going to happen next year? I didn't want to be too forward, too aggressive, too presumptuous, that we were still going to see each other. We'd met each other's families. He came to visit. It was lovely, wonderful. And he said, well, I'm going to be captain on the water ski team next year. That was not the answer I was.
My rocket fast mind didn't compute what she really wanted to ask. And we actually, that's a chapter in our book called 2 Words. If she said, what's going to happen to us? I might have had a clue to answer the question in a better fashion.
But I didn't feel I had the permission to ask that then, just by my social upbringing. So I made the assumption that he just didn't really love me after all, that I was just imagining it. We were at a beautiful paradise-like school in Florida. It was lovely. And so I listened to all the external voices that I heard saying, that's not real life. You're in college. You don't have any responsibilities. So, get real kind of thing. And we broke up. It was extremely traumatic. I knew at the age of
Poppy broke us up, to be clear.
Yes. I knew at the age of 14 that I was going to be an undergraduate art major. I loved that. While the campus was absolutely stunning and beautiful, the art room was in the physical plant area where the maintenance people were.
It was a dump.
It was a dump. And I can attest today, it's still that way. They've never fixed up the art room, but the reason I mention it is that after we broke up, I spent the rest of the school year in the art room, because those were people that, back then there were, I had gay friends, and gay people didn't really come out back then. And so they were the ones that accepted me. I felt like I belonged. And so I really loved that part of it. I wasn't connected with anybody else. And I shortly got engaged and got married soon after I graduated. And probably had the thought, well, someone wants me. Got divorced twice, married and divorced twice. Have 4 children. And in that 3-decade time when I was single, I tried to find Geoff. And this is pre-Google, calling information on the phone back in the late 90s.
The dark ages.
And then there's a part in our book where in Becky, it speaks to the synchronicity that you talked about, where in 2003, I was at, or 2002, I was at a college with one of my daughters, visiting the school, and it was their Founders Day as well. There were 250 people in the room. A woman beckons me over to sit with her so my daughter could sit with other prospective students.
During lunch, yeah.
Sit with her. I asked if, are you from this area? She said, no, I'm from Cleveland, where Geoff's from. I throw out that name. I was like, maybe somebody knows Geoff Spencer. And she, of all the people in the room, she is the one person that she said, oh yes, I know the family. His brother was a good friend of mine. And she was the one that told me about 9/11. I had no idea. And so
Poppy had met my brother when we were
Yes.
dating in college. We both met each
Several
other's
times.
families.
And so I'm like crying and whatever. I tried to reach out to the family, but I didn't know where they were. And that was it. And so after I was divorced the second time, I took back my maiden name, went to find Geoff on Facebook, no longer on Facebook now, but at the time. And I found a guy that lives in Australia because he has the British spelling of the name Geoff, Geoff. And he was kind of like a gnarly looking guy. And I was like, I don't know if that's
what's
him.
He doing in Australia if it's him? He looks like the Dickens. He looks terrible.
He kind of looked like a rugged Santa, you know. And I was like, I don't think that's him. And I remember this so well. I closed my laptop and I was like, you know what? Just forget it. He's not out there. Just stop looking for him. And so I did. And
a couple months later,
following month, he went on Facebook. He wasn't on Facebook.
And I just happened one day, I was divorced, and I kind of popped into my head, whatever happened to Poppy? This one is again thought, why did that thought come to me?
Yeah.
Whatever happened to Poppy? And I typed in her maiden name and found her in a nanosecond, found her Facebook page, found her web page, found a phone number, and I said, oh, what the heck? I'm just going to give her a call. What's the worst that could happen? She can blow me off again. My far reach was, hey, it was great talking to you. Thanks for taking my call. Nice. Have a good rest of your life. And obviously the phone call was 1,000 times more than that.
And I said instead, oh my God, I have been looking for you for 30 years, for 3 times in the last 10 years. I heard about your brother. And then I said the most meaningful words that he wanted to hear, that I didn't know he wanted to hear. I'm sorry if I broke your heart. I never meant to hurt you. And it was from that point on, and that is something that we wrote about in our book, and it speaks to what we can all do in connecting consciousness
and in life.
A term that we actually trademarked, that we came up with, called cognitive bypass. And cognitive bypass is when you speak from your heart. There's no censoring, there's no filtering in the brain. You don't use caution, like be careful what you say when you're speaking from your heart. And this is not to be like going on a rant about somebody who's passionate and angry and aggressive, but when you're speaking from your heart, from a place of love, in that heart space, that's what cognitive bypass is.
We both could have been very careful and guarded and watch out, don't let it happen again. Nothing could have been further from the truth. We both went right to this beautiful spot and we almost were immediately back where we were, and everything fell so perfectly into place from that moment on. And it was just a beautiful, wonderful, exciting journey that's just kept on going now for 12 years. We've just had an incredible ride. And part of this is too, we talked about, I think you might have said these words, Chris, or Becky, a leap of faith. So much of these things, we're doing this right now in CC. Everything that all of us are doing is a complete leap of faith. We believe in what's taking place here, and we're committing to this. And we know that something marvelous is happening, something exciting is happening, something that none of us can necessarily nail down and understand perfectly, but we're on board. We know it, and Poppy and I have just gone from one step to another here within CC. Like Chris asking us a question one day.
It's all Chris's fault.
It's all Chris's fault. Yeah. Would you want to take over the central region? And we're like,
no. Do you want to be the coordinators in Wisconsin?
Yeah, right. And then the next thing she goes, you can have my job now and take over the central region so I can do this.
Becky.
So I can work with Becky. Okay. The next thing you know, we were doing that.
But I think back, that lack of communication at 21 years old really inspired me. And I went back and got my graduate degree. I really wanted to understand human behavior, why things were the way they were in the external world, why they weren't meshing with my intuition, why there was such a block there. And so it really helped. And that's why I became a registered art therapist. It's why I became a psychology professor. I loved teaching that. I wrote about 4 or 5 courses that I taught over a period of 10 years. I loved the students. It was at an art and design college in Florida. So I got them. I understood. I was like our little hole in the wall art studio. Those students were super sensitive and socially awkward, but it didn't matter. We all loved each other. And so I embraced that teaching. And then when Geoff and I got back together, there weren't any, like Becky, just like you spoke to earlier, there weren't any obstacles. There were none, except other people's projecting their fears. And like, what, isn't this, he's going to leave, he's going to move to Florida, he's going to be, and what about your kids? And they were teenagers, and it's like, they're fine, we were very upfront about everything. If any of my 4 kids don't like you, we're not going to be together. I mean, that's just, I was very honest about that. And
luckily, I passed that test.
Yes, he did. But it was, true to form. So every time I had an obstacle, like Geoff went to the boat, I would go back to the canvas or the art or the meditation. That was my cathartic experience. And I always did things in an alternate way than other people. And so we decided in 2012, right after we were married, you know what, let's leave these careers.
Leap of faith.
People say to us all the time, oh my gosh, I like your story, you should write a book.
Okay, I guess we're writing a book.
Okay, let's do that. And so we left these careers. I really liked teaching, and I liked the art therapy. I worked for many years as an art therapist. But we knew we had to focus on that. And I think we could help people and couples to communicate really well and get to that real, authentic communication. And so I was already a coach. Geoff took the coaching certification, and we help people. And then we realized that people were coming to us when they were not interested in the relationship any longer. And so we became family law mediators to help them
gracefully move out of a relationship that isn't working.
So for instance, like we also believe that for children, not to harbor distaste or dislike for somebody, we're very, inclusive of ex-spouses and do things together, have them over for holidays with our children, even though they're, 20s and 30s. So we still believe that that's important.
To forgive and move on.
Yeah. So anyway, so we wrote the book, and then everything was a leap of faith after that.
Yep.
And there were we had challenges with one of our kids. And I remember saying to Geoff,
which one? Mine, of course, right.
But we and it was like, I would ask Geoff to trust me on this. I said, I think this is, good, that they were just veering off this very dangerous path. And
I think that's part of one of the things that Poppy and I always talk about too. One of the key foundations it's so important in all relationships is trust. And if the trust gets compromised, it's really, really tough. And so you have to make sure that you are both able to implicitly trust each other. And if you can, then it can make it a perfect relationship.
So for 2 years, we worked, especially with women. We started a group for women who had been in narcissistic abusive relationships, and really helping them take the steps and coaching them and guiding them. And then a year ago, in September, Wisconsin had a vacancy for a connecting consciousness coordinator. And we happened to go to something that was like a retreat. It wasn't really sanctioned CC. And we we just were, for the heck of it, we were just there, and the energy in the room was fearful. You know, we really picked up on it. So we tried to
and you can imagine that we didn't like that, and we were going to raise that vibration.
We didn't like it. It was just that we came from a place of vulnerability and shared our insecurities and our fears, and it opened the door to a really rewarding experience where everybody felt free and safe to share. So sort of like holding a container of a safe space. Like, we just made that intention, like, we're going to create a safe space here. And then everybody was really great. And the next day, it was a Sunday morning. I was like, wasn't there some CC email about somebody looking for
some
a
woman
coordinator?
named Chris was asking
looking
about
for a
this.
coordinator. I was digging through emails, and I was like, you know what the heck? I think it was early in the morning. I woke up just called to do this. And this is another one testing.
That she looks at me and I go, this is what we're going to do. It's like, okay, I guess that's what we're going to do.
So that's how this.
And the rest is history.
And the rest is history.
Yeah, I'm grateful you guys stepped up to answer that email and that call, and then stepping into the central regional position too. So in telling your story, the two of you have done a lot of work with emotions, and a lot of it has come from your own personal story. I thought maybe we could shift gears and talk about emotions a little bit, because I think these days emotions can be high for a lot of people, and there's a lot going on. And for me personally, I'll say a lot going on, like inner and outer. And I know the two of you created an emotional clock and trademarked an emotional clock, because we use that in one of our spiritual topics on honoring emotions and vibrations. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and share why you created it and what it's all about?
In fact, we have a little. You probably can't read. It's probably backwards in the read, but this is the clock, and basically the whole idea behind this. Go ahead, you speak to it, Pops, if you want.
Well, and Chris, you would probably know this in writing a book, and Becky, you as well, as you're writing your book. Sometimes you lay out your storyline, what you're going to do, and then the words and the story takes on its own voice, and it just goes in another direction. So as we're writing our story, we kept coming across ideas and emotions that we struggled with and that we didn't recognize. And we said, what if we created like a device that would help people with.
How do you get here? How do we get in these situations? What's the dynamic that gets us there?
And if we could put something tactile and tangible on the emotions, it would help us to understand them and sort them better than it would be when they're all tangled up and enmeshed. So we took like the left brain approach, combined it with the right brain, and created the clock, which has 12 different emotions on it. And the right side of the clock are the sort of the undesirable emotions of confusion, anxiety.
Or how you get to a point. In fact, we always used to say that 6 o'clock was where most when we were doing our counseling, they'd reach out to us when it was 6 o'clock. Basically, they were at I can't take this anymore. I have to change something in my life. This doesn't work. I have to either fix it or move on, one or the other. And that we always said the 6 o'clock moment.
It's like the fear point.
Yeah.
So we created the device to help people manage their emotions, and then but the most important part was to address it as soon as possible, and so that they didn't accumulate.
And they only got in trouble when they didn't address whatever the issue was. That we always, like, 1 o'clock was confusion. And we always tell people, if there's something that's bothering you, something on your heart, find a way to bring it out, find a way to talk about it, because you only get in trouble when you don't. And that's how how things grow and grow and grow. Next thing you know, you're yelling at each other, and you didn't have any idea how you got there. Or not
talking at all.
Or not talking at all.
Depending on people's communication, skills or development. And so sometimes we would say things like, I'm not really sure how to say this. I don't really know what's bugging me, but I have this sense that, oh, we just lost Becky. We have this sense that something is the matter, and could you help me with this? And so that's how we would get to those emotions. So that's why we developed it.
All right, good. Okay, we lost Becky. Hopefully she'll come back and join us. There she is.
And we're back.
What happened there? Because I saw both of yours freeze, but I heard you talking. So I heard you talking right up until the end, until it cut off. Did you guys lose me?
Yes, you disappeared briefly, and it was hardly anything, just a blip.
But we miss you a lot, Becky, when you were gone for those 20 seconds.
And now you're back.
we felt the loss.
Oh, bless you. So that must be mine, but I heard you the whole time. So yeah, when you're talking about the emotional clock, and when we'll go straight back into it. And when you've done that, I want to talk about that, because it's all very, very important in terms of the mind control and program that's going on, because I think what's happening is that they're trying to reach a state of confusion, so then you can unprogram people when they're in a state of confusion. So I will bring that in when you finish that. Hopefully you guys won't lose me again.
No, I think we're pretty well finished.
Yeah, I guess we wanted to talk about kind of the left side of the clock, because whenever anybody came to us and they shared, it's the old thing about finally being vulnerable, finally sharing, finally getting out. We would take them to the next step, which would be 7 o'clock was relief. It was this moment of great, I'm dealing with this. I'm finally looking at it. I'm getting this out, and it was a moment of relief. And then 8 o'clock took them to this next spot, which was the next critical piece of forgiveness, forgiving themselves, forgiving the other person or parties that were involved in whatever the challenge was. And then it takes them to 9 o'clock, hopefulness, and eventually moves them all the way around to the top of the 12 o'clock was getting back to love and trust and having that all back. So, and we often tell people it's, you could do it with the relationship you're in. If you can repair it, we'll be happy to help you do that. If you can't, we'll help you move on from it and find love and trust again in another relationship, if that's what you care to do.
And just as a caveat here, we in September of last year of 21, we said, you know what, we'll just put our mediation practice on the back burner, and now it's completely
now it's in the freezer.
We don't do it. We're 100% CC, just so everyone knows that we're committed to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Poppy and Geoff. That's phenomenal. And incredibly grateful, because you bring so much to connecting consciousness with all of your skills. And I was thinking about that emotional clock.
Mm-hmm.
I think for some people, perhaps many, they reach a certain point, and I'm not sure where it is. I mean, I'd be grateful if you went through 1 to 5 again, sure. Because I have a feeling at one point people often freeze and get stuck in that, and instead of moving on, they then just sort of try and box it up, bury it deep, and then that becomes a block. So
that's at 6 o'clock. So 3, 4, and 5 we have sort of jokingly referred to as the Bermuda Triangle. 3 o'clock is despair, 4 o'clock is shame and guilt, 5 o'clock is anger, and 6 o'clock is fear, and that's where you get the fight or flight syndrome.
Yeah, people, Becky, this kind of going to your point, that looks like Becky might have froze again. The thing that we always see, it would cycle. People would cycle back. They'd go back to that despair. They hit that wall and wouldn't do anything about it.
Sorry, that broke up for me. Did everyone else hear that, or is it just my Wi-Fi again?
It was just you, I think, Becky. I think it was just you.
It's just me. Okay, that's
right.
Good. That means it's recorded.
Just to highlight again, because
it says my internet's it says my internet connection is stable. I do apologize for this.
That's all right.
Now.
That's all right. You can watch this after the fact too, by the way. Triangle.
Yes.
Yeah. But, But at least it's recording properly for everyone
Oh, Becky,
else. That Bermuda Triangle is a point, and as you said, it can go maps now.
Becky, you're cutting in and out.
But to finish the thought, this is where we usually would see people, and they get stuck in this from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock in this Bermuda Triangle loop. And that's where they'd eventually come to us and say, they hit that 6 o'clock wall again. And that's where we would talk to people and say, okay, we can easily show you a pathway beyond this if you're willing to. And I always say this, it always comes down to one thing. It's always the courage. It's always courage is the thing that gets in anybody's way with any of these kind of topics. It's the courage to face it. It's the courage
to take a leap of faith when we don't know what the unknown in the future will bring. It's something, it's like that old, if the fear of change is greater than the change itself, it probably won't happen. But it's that leap of faith. It's the something I got, in my grad work as an art therapist. It was like, trust the process. Everything was trust the process. And so even though we can't see what's in front of us, you just trust that it's going to be okay.
But to do that, you need to open up to the flow. And what I'm saying is that for so many people, and traditionally, people do get stuck in the Bermuda Triangle and they block it and they box it away. And this is how trauma sets up, not only individual trauma, but generational trauma. And this is a hugely important topic because people worldwide, I mean, not everybody, but many people worldwide hold ancestral trauma. And that stuff being blocked up and boxed up. And with the emotional clock, you have a process, a way of working through and stepping out of that, breaking out of that and reaching a point of joy. So you could use your emotional clock as a tool for enlightenment and personal development. And very, very importantly as well, mind control works on keeping everything boxed in. But if people step into the fear, from fear then into the confusion, if people start to wake up and step into the confusion, that will start to break down the mind control programming that is imposed on humanity in general throughout the media and TV and so on. And I think what humanity needs to do next is step into a period of confusion. It won't be very pleasant for many people, but if they reach that point, then that's when programming can start to break down. And if there's help around from people like us within Connecting Consciousness and others who are awake and aware and also sensitive to the process, we can help guide people through to not only a pathway to the truth, but a pathway to their own personal development and to joy and connectivity, I think.
Beautiful.
Well said.
And I think, when we talk about being called into CC, I do believe it's absolutely divinely inspired because so much of our work in the last 10 years, but 8 years before we really got involved with being a coordinator and regional coordinator, is the working with that mind control, that manipulation from, just people, individuals, and now see it as such an expansive group where individuals that we work with, we help them understand gaslighting, we help them understand cognitive dissonance, and we worked with it. I used to teach that in the psychology classroom, so it's like, oh wow, this is on a world scale now that we have gaslighting.
Yeah, this is the cognitive dissonance is going to be one of the biggest challenges we have to deal with here. That's just too hard to hear this stuff.
It's the confusion that Becky's speaking about, but it is a first step. You're right. If we can get in there. We were recently at I hate to say it, but we're recently at a CC event. I'm not going to say where, but and a member had been a member for a while, and had said that they had been at another CC event. I was like, oh, wait, in the central region. And she said, yes. And she named a name, and that person had been removed from CC, and so it was a breakout group. And so I gently shared as best I could. I said, oh, that doesn't sound like it was a CC sanctioned event. I think it was probably, something else. But her face got confused because the person that was holding the event made the implication and gave her the perception that it was a CC event. And so we just shared that, your CC event, you'll get all the notifications. It'll say connectingconsciousness.org in your email. And so that's how we left it. But I didn't want to hammer the point home, but at the same time, and I know you and Simon have both said this, that we do have infiltrators in CC. We do have people posing and spreading the confusion and doing that in our external world and within the organization.
Yeah.
I know. Sorry, Chris. And it's so important that, people do the spiritual work so that they can develop their intuition and discernment. And certainly within Connecting Consciousness, we do have a set format of how events happen. It has to be organized by a sanctioned coordinator working either on with an event host, and the event host working with a coordinator, or with a coordinator, and there will be official CC emails and so on. But yeah, there's always going to be someone who wants to try and copy what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. But so I just wanted to talk about the beauty of CC, because those things do happen and they're few and far in between. So since we're on the topic, I think CC has been such a blessing for so many of us, and many of the people who are listening to this podcast are CC members, but there may be some people who are like, oh, what's CC all about? And I think there's people who have joined CC for a variety of different reasons. Some people have found CC because they listened to Simon and heard about Intel, and then they stay because they find that they have the opportunity to get together with like-minded people and to learn and grow. And we do offer monthly spiritual topics, which aren't lessons per se. They're more opportunities and prompts for self-reflection for all of us, so we can all be on a journey of growth together. I also wanted to share, I think, while people maybe join CC for different reasons, one of the things that seems to be common with almost everyone that I talk to within CC, and I include myself in this category too, is that we've all been called crazy or been criticized or ostracized for our beliefs. And so CC provides this beautiful space where we can get together and figure out, hey, it's not just me. I'm not the only one, which is a good tie to a song we're going to have in a few minutes. And also to feel like, we're not so crazy after all. And, I know I've said, thank God for CC many times, and I've heard so many people say that. It's a beautiful place where you can come and talk with a group of people who accept you as you are, and there's non-judgment. We talk a lot about non-judgment and empowerment, and in the world that we live in today, that's just incredibly beautiful and powerful. So just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Chris. And also, as well as connecting, now that Connecting Consciousness, it is very well connected. It's very well supported with coordinators and admin and event hosts worldwide. And we have a fantastic team who know each other and work well together. So now our groups are not just in their own discrete groups. Sometimes they meet up with Zooms with different groups, around the world, like, Scotland and New Zealand, or I'm thinking Africa and South America. They all combine and all mix and match and share their experiences, their stories, their wisdom and inspiration. And we've actually had a few instances where we've been told connecting consciousness has actually straightforwardly saved people's lives, whether it's through love and support, or whether it's always through love and support, or whether it's actually practical physical intervention. If someone's very ill and they're on their own or in a different country, and they get in touch with someone, say, I'm very ill, I'm in this location. We had this situation, a guy from Colombia, I believe, I might have got it wrong, but one from one of our Latin American countries, suddenly fell ill when he was a truck driver in another country in South America. And he contacted his coordinator and said, I'm in this country, I don't know anyone, I'm very poorly, and I know I need medical help. This coordinator got in touch with members of that country, and 2 members independently said, I will go and help and support him. They went to him, took him to a hospital that he felt comfortable with, actually paid for his hospital fees. It did save his life. He was dangerously ill. And then they helped look after him. They nurtured him with food, and it created a friendship with people within the country who'd never met before, and also with this guy, and it literally saved his life. And that's what connecting consciousness can do in extreme, fantastic situations. But on a basic level, it gets together people who can just chat and feel supported and talk about topics that they're interested in. So it works on many different levels. So thank you.
And we agree with every bit of that. I mean, one of the things that Poppy and I have the opportunities to attend a lot of these things like we just did. And it was so exciting the other day. We had multiple people, I think at least 5 or 6 people that had never, ever been to any of the Zooms, or had been a long time since they had. They'd never been to any in-person gatherings. And it's fun to watch this because for many, it's very emotional. It's talk about cathartic things like, oh, I can't believe I'm finally here. I found you all. It's like, oh, yeah. There's great joy and relief that they can finally be safe to be speaking to these things and being around like people that are loving and embracing. And it's just a beautiful thing to watch. It's so much fun to be a part of.
Absolutely. So what do you think, Becky? Is it time for a song to wrap things up?
I think so, yes. And I just want to thank Poppy and Geoff so much for being fantastic guests on our Sacred Wisdom podcast. I hope you come and join us again sometime. And looking forward to hearing the song. Thank you both.
I just wanted to ask one thing. Going back to the 9/11, and you talk about people coming together and doing what's in their heart and without even giving it a thought. Many people don't know it. Maybe you all do. After 9/11, there was something called the boat lift of 9/11. And it is the greatest rescue in history, in world history. And what happened was, after those towers were demolished, people had nowhere to run. The streets were closed, the subways were closed, the bridges,
the tunnels, the subways were closed. People were stuck.
And I believe that was probably the intention, to wipe out not just the people in the buildings, but everybody in the island of Manhattan. And they ran for the water. And I just thought, that just gives me chills every time I say it, because water is emotion. And they ran for the water. And you have these little dinky ferries and little things.
And big ferries.
And somebody made the call and overruled whatever should take place. And they called in.
The Coast Guard called in anybody with a
boat
that could get there. And
if you had a canoe, you come.
And it spoke marvelously to the generous, giving, wonderful spirit of mankind. That, and also the story of what happened in Newfoundland.
In Newfoundland. But this was the greatest boat lift. They rescued 500,000 people off the island of Manhattan
in 9 hours.
In 9 hours, it was greater than Dunkirk or any of those other Normandy, any of those other rescues, and it was just it was just one person that started it, which could lead into the song, but
that's incredible.
Watch it, Boat Lift of 9/11, and you will cry. And so many of the boaters are just like regular guys, and their spouses and their families just like, don't go, this is dangerous. And they all say, I won't live with myself if I don't
gotta
try.
help.
I have to.
People were all wanting so desperately to help, and there was very few things you could have done to help, and this was one of them. But
not that moment, because there was chaos everywhere, and they went into the fear, into the chaos, with the intention of I have to do what God is telling me to do. I need to help people, even though it's dangerous.
And it also reminds me too of the day after 9/11 happened. I was taking my son to school, and I told him, I said, pay very close attention. You've seen the very worst of mankind take place. Pay attention. You're going to see the very best of mankind show up from this point on, where people will, and we saw it over and over and over and over. It's many different ways,
and that's what CC is. I think CC is like this beacon of the very best of
but it all started with one voice. And there's a song that I love to do that you've all both you've probably heard too many times to even count now, but I love telling the story. I love singing the song because it tells a great story of how one voice can make a huge difference. Just one voice singing in the darkness. All it takes is one voice singing so they hear what's on your mind. And when you look around, you'll find there's more than one voice singing in the darkness, joining with your one voice. Each and every note another octave. Hands are joined and fears unlocked. If only one voice would start it on its own. We need just one voice facing the unknown. And then that one voice would never be alone. It takes just one voice. That's the story through the song.
Thank you, Geoff. Thank you, Poppy. Thanks, Becky. And that is a great note to end on. So all of those who are watching our video, thank you for joining us.